Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. It's time for the second half of the Live from the Heartland show for the week of May 23rd. And earlier this spring, I went down to the historic neighborhood of Pullman, way far on the south side of Chicago, for a spring sale. And I had my books and my photos. And a number of people, turns out, knew me from the Heartland Cafe. And one of them was a guy that I think his last name is Mike Manika. We call him, I think he's called Pullman Mike. And he was totally surprised to see me, let me know that he used to be a patron of both the Heartland Cafe and the Red Line Tap. And he asked if he could introduce me to a couple of people who had a bookstore called Undercover Books. I said, sure. So Pullman Mike introduced me to Todd Zaruba and Lynn Bagley. And they are the two people that own this wonderful little bookstore called Undercover Books. And I had the honor of bringing my photos down there. They put them up in all these different corners of the bookstore. I really liked the presentation and how the pictures look on a dark green wall. And we had a really nice opening. There were a number of old friends showed up. Got to talk to a number of people who had been involved with the Innocence Project and had just gotten out of prison or had gotten out of prison, wrongfully incarcerated. And I was very impressed with this little bookstore, and I asked Todd if he would come on and be a guest. Well, I actually asked them both, but only one of them is showing up today. But we will have Lynn on sometime too. So with all that running of my mouth, how are you today, Todd?
I'm doing well, Michael. Thanks
for having me. What are you doing over there in the bookstore today?
The same thing I do most days. I just, when I'm not selling books to someone or helping people find books that they're looking for, most of what I do is just sit and read and enjoy the environment, that we built down here.
Well, that's good. Well, what did you guys do before you opened a bookstore? Because I know you were in Rogers Park.
Yeah, my wife, Lynn, my partner, she lived in Rogers Park when we were dating. So I actually never lived in Rogers Park myself. I was living in Bucktown at the time. We got together and decided we wanted to make a go of it together. And one of the things we talked about early on was, kind of what we wanted to do with our lives and the idea of having a bookstore was something that we discussed really early on. I was working IT, managing infrastructure for an organization called Illinois Action for Children, which does good work helping people subsidize their childcare costs primarily. But I was doing the, sort of back-end IT support, computers and, networking and all that sort of stuff. And we, that was a satisfying work, especially working for an organization that was just doing such great work like that. But, after a period of time, I felt like I wanted to do something else. And so we decided to move forward with this bookstore idea.
Well, what compelled you really to open a bookstore at a time, I assume, first let me ask, how long has the bookstore been there?
We've been open about 2 years, but it's sort of been in the works for more than a decade. We, spent a lot of time looking for a location that was going to make sense for us. We had some requirements, kind of aesthetically what we were looking for. And we wanted to open a place, where there weren't many bookstores or really anything to speak of, to try to bring something to a community that might need it. So that was important to us. And it took a long time for us to find a building, that first of all, that we could afford, but also met our requirements of there's a certain aesthetic we wanted and also to, open someplace in a place that it was going to be needed.
Well,
So that's
you opened a bookstore at a time, I think a number of bookstores were closing. And then,
yeah.
the pandemic. I know I had always, my wife's name is Paige, and she's really a book person. And I know that she's going to love coming down to your place and seeing it. But we had long talked about a bookstore. We did sell books at the Heartland, but not to the level that you guys do. I mean, you have these rolling racks and you have, an awful lot of books. How much of your bookstore is involved with just used books, and how much of it is rare books? And where do you get all these books from? And do you buy books? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So our shelves can handle about 10,000 books. And they are, as probably noticed when you were here, they are overstocked. I mean, we have books in every nook and cranny in the store, and the shelves are overloaded. And then we have an additional probably 20 or 25,000 books in an on-site storage. So, it's a lot because most of our titles are, they're unique. We do have a few copies of some books, but most of the books we have a single copy. So, we're talking probably 25,000 or more individual titles. We try to specialize in books that are out of print or maybe difficult to find, not necessarily rare, I guess, or antiquarian, certainly, although we do have a little bit of that stuff. Some of our rare books include just interesting titles like, we do have first edition, first printing copies of some stuff that's collectible, but we also have like books that are just odd. And the one book that comes to mind is we have a copy of Dead Man Walking, and it's signed by the author, Sister Pershing, but also by all of the stars from the movie, Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn, for instance.
Wow.
It's just a paperback copy of that book, which is, I don't know where it came from even, or how, how we ended up with it, but it's just, we have some unique things like that. But yeah, most of what we have is just, good stuff, like good both nonfiction and fiction. We got the whole gamut.
You both are politically oriented and progressive people. Well, we could go off of that, but I guess what I had wanted to ask is how much of your clientele are people that know about you and learn about you from other parts of the city, and how much of it is local people? And tell us a little bit about who's local, what your community is about.
Sure. So, I would say it's a decent mix of, people who we are connected to through, just different community organizations or, friends or whatever. And we have really good support by the community. The community is, Washington Heights, I think demographically is the most African American neighborhood in the city of Chicago. And so we have a pretty good African American following from the neighborhood, but we also our store borders the Beverly neighborhood, and so we also get people from that side, and so it's a good mix of people. Used bookstores draw a certain kind of people, I think, and I love them. But people will seek a used bookstore out. We have people come in to the store who, just happen to be vacationing or something, and their thing is to go to used bookstores. So it's a wonderful group of customers that we've built. We have people that come in and buy books, maybe every week. which is crazy to me because I love used bookstores. I am not going to a used bookstore every week to buy books. So that's great. But then we have, people who are stopping once or twice a year, who I still consider good regular customers. And then we have, plenty of people who poke their head in just to see what it looks like in here. So
yeah, there's a lot to see in there. So a little bit more about the neighborhood and the politics. I noticed when I was there that there were most of the people who came who had already been there before. And there were two gentlemen there who had both been in prison and had been brought out of prison by the Innocence Project, which your wife and partner in the store, Lynn Bagley, as I understand, is a private investigator in general. That's her work, and she works with the Innocence Project. How many of these kind of programs do you have that are of a political, progressive, social justice nature?
We do take advantage of my wife's position. She's the senior staff investigator at the Illinois Innocence Project, and so being in that role, she is also involved or knows people from several other organizations that do work to improve the criminal justice system, to improve the prison system in general, and also innocence work. So, and we open up our space, our store, for those groups to come and have events or even just meetings, or for these people just to come in and have a place to feel comfortable, to talk to each other and sort of that's a big part of why we wanted to open the place is to have a safe place for people to come and talk and just feel comfortable, that may not have a lot of other options.
So you basically see having a bookstore as a community building vehicle.
Absolutely. That's probably our primary goal, I would say. The bookstore business, especially used bookstore business, is not a business you're going to make any money at, and that we knew that going in. That really is not the point. We opened a bookstore because we love books. We love the idea of having a space, where people can come and enjoy books and enjoy each other.
And I think I saw somewhere that you've had groups of high school kids come in. I think Percy Julian High School brought a bunch of people. What's that experience like, bringing kids into the bookstore? I'm sure most of them have never seen anything like that. Maybe they got to see a library, and we don't know if
it's interesting. We do. I mean, we're in very close proximity to Julian High School. It's literally across the street. And so we do get quite a few of the students in, and it's interesting because a lot of times the students will come in to the store for the first time. And first of all, they're just sort of in awe that a place like this exists, I guess. They're not used to having something like this accessible to them, I think. And they'll ask questions like, are these books for sale or I think they're confused sometimes that it's more like a library. And in essence, it is, in that we absolutely encourage these students to while they're in the store, to pull a book off the shelf and sit and read and enjoy it while they're here. We certainly don't require anyone to purchase anything or we want these kids to discover books and what books are about and how important they are. So that's a big thing, and it's we're pleasantly surprised by the kids who come in and actually have a fondness for the store.
Well, Todd Zaruba, how did you, as someone who owns a bookstore now, develop an interest in books?
I was interested in reading pretty much as far back as I can remember. I always, I I I was, an athletic kid, but I always enjoyed reading. So I, was the nerdy athlete, I guess you might say. Um, and I when I went to college, that's where I really uh, grew a fondness for used bookstores in particular, and sort of the aesthetic of used bookstores, and just the idea of looking at books that you might not be able to find anywhere else, especially at that time. Back in the when I was in college in the 1980s, there was no internet you could go and buy a book on. So the used bookstores especially offered books that the only other place you might be able to find them would have been the library, and you could have your own copy of something was pretty special.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Nebraska. I was a farm boy. I went to the University of Nebraska and got an English degree and a theater degree. So,
well, I'm glad to hear of Nebraska. I'm not a big fan of their current governor and their general direction, but my great grandfather was a state legislator in Nebraska, a horse farmer. Actually took the horses east to market and never came back. So my grandma, who was young then, went on a covered wagon back to central Illinois. But I've always had a fondness for Nebraska. And I know that the University of Nebraska has a pretty good press. They put out some books. My friend Dave Megacy, whose book Out of Their League, when he's another intellectual or nerdy athlete guy. When he quit pro football, he did a book for Ramparts Press called Out of Their League. And I know it was reprinted by University of Nebraska Press.
Yeah, no, it was a good school. I don't have any ill will toward the state, except for the politics are a little too conservative for me. But
right on. Okay, so do you buy books from people, and do you have people coming in trying to hustle their books? And I know my wife, when we needed money, sometimes she would sell off her massive collection of books.
Yeah, we don't actually buy books. It's really hard to for a business like us to do that. The margins are so slim that oftentimes the amount of money that we can offer people for their books, to me at least, would be insulting. To the people who are trying to sell their books. So we don't do that, but we do take book donations, and we get donated books probably at least a couple times a week. And then we source books through things like estate sales, library sales, thrift stores, yard sales, places like that. Lynn, my wife, is really really good about finding the hidden treasures at the estate sales and places like that. So, she'll buy a book that, for $1 or something, where the value might be $100 or more. So that's pretty cool.
Is there a network of used bookstores? Are you in touch with other people? I'm thinking of up on Clark Street, there's Heirloom Books now. And there's a lot of stories around that. We had them on the show a long time ago, but what is your relationship with other booksellers?
We don't, we participate in the local, the independent bookstore crawl, for instance, which includes, this year included, I think over 50 stores in Chicago. And so we have some connection there. But because our location, there's not a lot of bookstores close to us. You kind of have to either go to like Hyde Park or Bridgeport, further north of us. There is one other bookstore down here, Bookies, which is a decent store, but it's primarily new books, so we don't really share a lot in common there either. But the independent bookstores do, I think, a good job of sort of cooperating with each other and coexisting, and the competition is really not a thing in the used bookstore world, I don't think. Which is great.
Oh, that's good. Um, well, I don't know. So the business side of things is always rough in the book business. And you've chose a neighborhood which is probably not, it's not an upscale neighborhood. I'm not sure of what the actual situation of Washington Heights is, but what are the advantages and disadvantages of being in a kind of an isolated location, for lack of a better word? Because I mean, it's wonderful. I've loved going to the way far south. I went to Pullman and seeing that neighborhood, and I had my longtime friend and business partner, Katie Hogan, with me, and she's from Beverly. So she knew a little bit about that. But what's the scene in your neighborhood, and is it an advantage or disadvantage?
Well, I think from our perspective, it's an absolute advantage. When we decided to do this, and we purchased the building which we live in. We live upstairs from the bookstore, which is very convenient for getting to and from work.
Right on.
But the intention was not to make money at this. And so in owning the building and keeping our overhead costs really low, we don't have to sell a lot of books to be able to keep the lights on, and that's all we want to do to keep the place open. So and we really want to serve a community that doesn't have something like this. Give them a place that they can kind of call their own and embrace.
Well, let me ask you about some of the other events you maybe do. I know I had a photo show opening, and the photos will be up through middle, or we don't know when it's coming down. But I'm also coming back, so I'll let you tell our listeners and viewers about that, because I'm looking
absolutely.
forward to it.
So yeah, Mike will be back in the store on May 31st, Saturday, May 31st, from 4 to 8 p.m. And he's gonna be doing some reading from his books and telling us some stories and answering questions and signing books. So hopefully we'll get people out to participate in that. I think it's gonna be a great event. Like you mentioned earlier, the event where we opened your photo exhibit was great. I think this will even be better, so we'll see. But yeah, we have all kinds of events in the store. We host live music in the store, usually just individual musicians, but sometimes like we have a jazz trio coming up who's played in the store before. They're going to be back in the latter part of July. I don't have the date yet, but that'll be posted on our calendar soon. We have poetry readings. We have, book signings. We have we host block clubs. We host book clubs. We what else we do? Play readings. We do have social media that we kind of try to keep people posted on. We have an email list we send out to, but other than that, is more like people come into the store and find out about the events there. So we probably could do a better job of marketing our stuff, but
website?
People find out about it.
You have a website?
We do. The website is ucbookschicago.com.
And let me ask you as a final question, do you have a favorite book and a favorite author?
I do. I mean, I have a lot of favorite books just because I love books, but I think my favorite book is a book called The Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. And I can't really explain to you why that's my favorite book. I just love it. Always have. And I think probably William Faulkner is my favorite overall author.
Well, we got a lot to talk about next time I see you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nebraska connection. And I want to thank you for coming on, Todd Zaruba. I really appreciate that.